Previously, when we created a variable that held an immutable object, the value of that immutable object was saved in memory. Here, we create a name with value Jim and assign it to another variable called student. It is the value Jim that is assigned to student. So when we reassign name to update it to Tim, this change is not reflected in the value of student. Lists are different from strings as they are mutable. Here, we create a list of scores and assign this same list to the variable grades. B, C, A, D, B, A. 6 of them. And when we change or mutate the scores list, making the 4th grade B instead of D, this affects both scores and grades. Both scores and grades are variable names for the same underlying list, and either name can be used to access and change that list. The behavior of variables containing mutable and immutable objects are very different and might even seem surprising at times. Experiment. Use the print functions and double-check your work where you can to make sure that your programs correctly keep track of their data. While you experiment with lists, there are some useful functions you should get familiar with. Len returns how many elements are in a list. Max returns the greatest element of a list. How the greatest element is determined depends on what type of objects are in your list. The maximum element in a list of numbers is the largest number. The maximum element in a list of strings is the element that would occur last if the list was sorted alphabetically. That's reticulated Python for this list. R is the largest letter alphabetically. In other words, greater than B, A, B, and A. This works because the max function is defined in terms of the greater than comparison operator. The greater than comparison operator is defined for many non-numeric types. If you're working with objects that can be compared with this, then you can use max on a list of the objects. For strings, the standard comparison is alphabetical, so the maximum of this list is the element that appears last alphabetically. Although you can create lists that hold a mix of elements of many types, as you see here, integers and text, the max function is undefined for lists that contain elements from different incomparable types. Here, you can see it breaks with this mix of data types. Min is the opposite of max and returns the smallest element in a list. Sorted returns a copy of a list in order from smallest to largest, leaving the original list unchanged. Here, for a list called sizes, the order is ascending. You can sort from largest to smallest by adding the optional argument reverse equals true. Now the order is descending. Let's introduce a new string method that works with lists. Join. Join takes a list as an argument and returns a string consisting of the list elements joined by a separator string. In this example, we use the string \n as a separator so that there is a new line between each element. For, new line, aft, new line, starboard, new line, port. We can also use other strings as separators with join. Here, we use a hyphen. It's important to remember to separate each of the items in the list you are joining with a comma. Forgetting to do so will not trigger an error, but will also give you unexpected results. In the example below, omitting a comma between Garcia and O'Kelly results in the following. Notice how the hyphen separator is missing between Garcia and O'Kelly, and instead the two strings were appended. This happens because of Python's default string literal appending. If join returns different results than expected, check for missing commas. Also, note that join will trigger an error if we try to join anything other than strings. We get an error here because an integer was included in the list. Lastly, a helpful method called append adds an element to the end of the list. Next, you'll practice working with lists and explore more list methods.